Welcome to Close Up Radio, where our hosts, Doug Llewellyn and Jim Masters, bring you the amazing stories of people who answered the call to unlock their potential and taken control of their own success with authenticity, creativity, persistence, and resilience. Close Up Radio special guests share their knowledge and wisdom so you, the listener, can live the most empowered life possible. Close Up Radio. And now, here's today's host, Jim Masters.
It's a pleasure to have you with us today, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the award-winning Close-Up Radio, a service of the award-winning Close-Up Television Radio. It's 3 p.m. Eastern here at our broadcast center, noon Pacific. And it is Monday, November 23rd, 2020, and we thank you again for making us a part of your day. We've got a very thought-provoking and inspiring and engaging episode of our series coming up with our very special guest, Judith Wood, who is a renowned Los Angeles-based immigration attorney specializing in political asylum. Her landmark victory in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals opened the door for women fleeing violence to seek refuge in the United States. The decision, recently under attack by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, would become the subject of a motion picture titled Saint Judy, starring Michelle Monaghan and Alfred Molina. A native New Yorker, Judy's early dramatic training and brief career acting off-Broadway helped her to hone the courtroom acumen, and that has really helped her deliver so many from desperate circumstances. Ms. Wood's passion for social justice has become a true calling, and since graduating Pepperdine School of Law, she's helmed dozens of precedent-setting decisions. In addition to a thriving legal practice, she also heads up the Human Rights Project, which is a nonprofit devoted to advocating for the rights of refugees all around the world. Indeed, her record as a tireless champion for the rights of immigrants speaks for itself. Most recently, she's scheduled to present with the Wonder Woman of the 4th Lifetime Achievement Award by Los Angeles City Councilman David Ayu. This is really exciting to have her here, and so timely and so apropos for our times. It is absolutely a real honor and a pleasure to welcome Attorney Judith L. Wood to Close Up Radio and to have an opportunity to really engage with her. This is one of those opportunities where we're going to call out to her now to have her pop on as a guest. But we're so excited to have her here because, again, we've got...
Hi, you've reached Judy Wood. Please leave your name and your number, and I'll call you back as soon as possible. Thanks.
It looks like she got cut off. Attorney Wood, Jim Masters here, and if you get our message, feel free to give us a call at the studio so we can continue. We'll reach out again. It looks like your call might have gotten disconnected. You might be on a cell phone, but we'll chat again in just a second. All right, thanks. So again, our very special guest, it looks like her phone might have been disconnected. She perhaps might be on a cell phone, possibly, and cell phones they have a mind of their own. And we're going to try to, maybe she got called away. This could have been an urgent call that came in perhaps maybe during the course of our initial conversation when we were connected before the show. Let's try her again, and perhaps maybe we can welcome her to the show. Again, technology sometimes has a mind of its own, but she might have been called away on an urgent call.
Hi, we got disconnected. There
you are.
Hello?
I was telling the audience that you might have been called away on an urgent, pressing call, perhaps.
Actually, we just got disconnected.
Welcome back. It's great to have you with us. And we was just chatting with the audience and telling them a little bit more about your extraordinary background. And welcome to the show, Attorney Wood. It's a real honor and a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
You're welcome. I would love to ask that question that I asked you when we were off air, and that is, having studied law in the way that you have, in such an expert and detailed and passionate way, there are many different, areas within law that you could have pursued, but this particular area of immigration is something that really is near and dear to your heart. What was it about this area of the law that really spoke to you and pointed you in the direction realizing that this was in your DNA to really focus on this area?
Well, before I was an immigration lawyer, I was a criminal defense attorney. And as a criminal defense attorney, I was a public defender, and I represented a lot of people who were not Caucasian, and many of them were Hispanic. And I noticed that the Hispanic clients got really a different kind of justice, rather injustice, than the Caucasian clients. And I also noticed that many people who were of Hispanic descent were pressured into filing guilty pleas, and I didn't know then what the result would be in terms of immigration. I think many of those people were not citizens, and I actually, as a new criminal defense attorney, did not know what the immigration consequences might be. Now a criminal defense attorney has to find out what the immigration consequences will be of a plea bargain. But I became very aware of what might happen to the Hispanic population when they pled guilty after I became an immigration lawyer. And then I was very aware of the sanctuary movement, because they were all, this was in the 1980s, and there were all these people streaming out of Central America due to the civil wars. And I became very aware of the fact that many people had been tortured in these prison camps in El Salvador and also in Guatemala. And I felt a calling to represent them, and I did. I moved to Los Angeles as a result of a calling to represent these people who were being tortured essentially in their home countries and had no other recourse but to seek asylum somewhere. Am I on? Have I gotten disconnected again? Oh, good.
No, you're
good.
there. Yeah. Just really in tune with your answer. It's a brilliant answer and a beautiful reason to be doing what you're doing. And I love what I mentioned in the introduction. You might not have heard it, but we were talking a little bit about the Human Rights Project. Tell us about the Human Rights Project and what it's all about and what the goals of the Human Rights Project are.
Well, the way it came to be is I actually had occasion to study in France. I went to the Institute for International Human Rights in Strasbourg, France, and I had occasion to study there for a summer. And when I came back, I decided to start the Human Rights Project and to basically bring international law into the domestic forum. Now, that's kind of a highfalutin phrase. What does it actually mean? Well, in immigration court, one can apply for political asylum, any other kind of asylum that may be available, withholding, and relief under the Convention Against Torture. Now, relief under the Convention Against Torture was not available when I started practicing immigration law in 1986, but later on it did become available because of the UN Convention Against Torture, and then the United States ratified it. And I had time and space and to actually really study the Convention Against Torture. And then when I came back to Los Angeles after studying there for the summer, I argued in many of my cases that the government should agree to grant the person Convention Against Torture relief. And the way it works out is that someone might not be able to win asylum because the rules of asylum are rather strict, and they've only become more strict. But if someone has been tortured or will be tortured in his or her home country, and the government is the one who's going to torture this person, or the government will turn a blind eye or acquiesce, this is all legal terminology, basically will let it happen, then the person does have a right in this country to apply for relief and not be sent back to the country where she or he will be tortured. Now, tortured is sort of a widespread social disease at this moment. It seems that government people all over the world act out a certain kind of cruelty towards dissidents or people who don't agree with the party line. And other people who might be in cartels or other organizations might be able to effectuate torture on victims as well, and the government is in collaboration or collusion with this. This happens a lot in countries all over the world where rather innocent people are being tortured and there isn't any relief other than somehow escaping and pleading their case here. And I became very sympathetic. Somehow I really heard that message, and I argued that both in the immigration courts and in the federal courts, and was able to prevail in a number of situations. And I hope that I can continue to do that work, because I feel that for some reason I've been called to do this and to represent these people who I do not know and who don't know me, but somehow they find me and reach out to me to try to save them. And so far I've only been working on cases that actually come to the United States, but I think that I probably will expand my practice and deal with people who are not here yet, and go further into the United Nations work on Convention Against Torture and prevention of torture worldwide.
How does the Human Rights Project actually engage with the immigration court? What is that process like?
Well, my office has basically two heads. It's the Law Office of Judith Wood and the Human Rights Project. And so many times what happens, part of it is a financial thing, because many times these people who come here and start a case don't have any money to pursue their case. So maybe they have a little bit of money, but then the case goes all the way to federal court and they don't have money to pursue that. And then it becomes a Human Rights Project case, which is basically a pro bono situation. That's the financial side of it. The political side of it, and we can't be political because we have a 501 status, but the ideological side of it is that we believe, and it's a loose conglomeration with myself at the head and other immigration lawyers who I train a lot of lawyers, who believe that in the United States we stand for something. That light, that the statue, that beacon that the Statue of Liberty holds out may have dimmed a little bit in the last few years, but it's still alive, and we want to make it brighter. And it stands for the idea that if you have suffered, if you have been tortured, if you have been ridiculed, if your humanity and your soul have been brought down to a level where there's no way you can exist except to escape, we believe that the United States should offer help to these people. And so we do every day. And the way it works out practically in court, many of these people have asylum cases, but asylum becomes a rigorous intellectual activity. In other words, one has to fit into a certain category. One has to have a well-founded fear of persecution based on one of these 5 grounds, each one which can be expanded upon: race, religion, nationality, social group, or political opinion. Now, social group is very vague. What is social group? And for a long time, women, this is very important right now, because the law has been changing, and sort of like a roller coaster, actually, changing that much. For a long time, women who suffered violence at the hands of a domestic partner, perhaps, or maybe another family member, were able to seek asylum in the United States, and it was recognized as a particular social group. And then several years ago, the former Attorney General Sessions said, no, these women, it doesn't, whatever they went through in their home country, that's not what asylum was written for. That was not the purpose of the statute. And that was a crushing blow to myself and my fellow immigration attorneys. And so we've buckled down and fought in all the federal courts, and we are getting some cases through, because it isn't just one woman who's being beaten. It's the fabric of the society from where she comes from, which allows a woman to be completely demeaned. We have cases, such extreme violence and hardship suffered by women, and their cases have to be recognized. We basically will not give up until they have won their cases.
That's fantastic.
That's one of the ways it works out in immigration court. Now, the mechanics of it, if you're interested, someone can apply for asylum affirmatively when they come to the United States. If they come through the border, it's problematic now because most likely they will have to wait in Mexico, which is horrific because there's no housing, there's no food, there's no job, and they're waiting in very dangerous circumstances. The cartels are very powerful in Mexico, and these asylum applicants become victims. I have one case where the gentleman died while he was waiting for his asylum case to be heard in court in San Diego. And then you have the whole situation of children at the border. Well, just last week, there was a federal court case which said, well, you can't just send these children back. You have to house them here. And we'll see how that develops. There's been a temporary restraining order on sending the children back to their country or back to Mexico. But nevertheless, one can also apply for asylum when one comes to the United States with a visa. And one is supposed to apply within a year of entry. But in many situations, these country conditions may change after a year. There may be a revolution or some political uprising, and which gives rise to a reason to apply later. And there have been new regulations written, but now there's also been a federal court case that also came down last week that temporarily has stopped that regulation. That regulation would say, sorry, but if you have waited more than a year to apply for asylum, you're not going to be eligible. Well, now there are still ways that a person can apply for asylum, even if it is more than a year. And the other thing is many people are escaping from gangs. Now, there are people who do not want to participate in gang activities, and there are people who reach out and try to rescue other young people who do not want to participate in gang activities. And then there are people who actually leave a gang once they're in a gang. And so there's a whole plethora of cases regarding whether these people are in a particular social group or not. And this case that I talked about regarding domestic violence, the name of the case is Matter of AB, and in that case, Attorney General Sessions also said that these gang-related cases do not fall into the circumstances where someone should be granted asylum, and we're fighting that as well. Now, on the other end of the spectrum of international human rights and immigration, you have lots of people in the United States who are undocumented. And a lot of these people are growing our food, are planting our food, are nurturing our society in numerous ways, both in agricultural ways, and many of them are frontline health workers, and many of these people are undocumented. They may have lived here for 10, 20 years, but they have never gotten what's in the colloquial a green card for some reason. Maybe they are on a waiting list, a quota system, but right now they're here undocumented. And so I am advocating for another legalization program. And with the incoming administration, I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk to the administration and Congress regarding another legalization program. Now, in 1986, under President Reagan, actually, who was a conservative president, a Republican, the Congress, and he signed it, passed what's called the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, commonly referred to as amnesty or legalization. And so many people who had worked in the fields or lived here for many years were able to legalize their status, and many of those people are now citizens. I think that we need another such program. If you recall, in the 1930s, many Mexican Americans, people who were American but of Mexican descent, were deported to Mexico. In the 1940s, many people of America who had American citizens but were of Japanese descent were put in internment camps. These are all glaring human rights issues, and the history of immigration law is the history of human rights, and we want it to be inclusive, not exclusive. We want to welcome people here and provide a safe place for people. Because when people have a safe place, generally they blossom, and we can become really great, not just great again, but really great if we allow these people to come here and to flourish and to share their gifts with us.
Beautifully said, beautifully said. What are the current issues being litigated in the immigration courts these days?
Well, one glaring issue is the children and the women who are kept detained, and children who are kept in cages, and children who are separated from their parents, and children who are missing, and parents who are missing. The administration had a policy of separating children from their parents or of putting people in cages, and that is a glaring issue that is getting litigated almost every week in federal court. I think that we're going to be able to change it and allow these people some sort of humanity rather than being kept in cages at the border. Another big issue is whether or not a human being is an illegal alien or not. Just the very terminology, illegal alien, is very insulting and demeaning. This is a human being, a person coming to the United States seeking safety. That person should not be simply regarded as an illegal alien or a thing rather than a person. Another important case that just came down, and I find very interesting, regarding the terminology terrorist. There's something called the terrorist bar, and that means that if someone is applying for asylum or any other kind of immigration relief, the person is not allowed and is not considered eligible for asylum if that bar relates to him or her. So in this case, a very interesting case called Nagusi, it was a person actually from a country in Africa, from Ethiopia, and he himself had been severely tortured and had tried to escape from the military in Ethiopia, but then he was recaptured. And when he was recaptured, his job in the military was to make sure that other people, other prisoners, did not escape. And the court, the federal court, just came out with a decision, which I disagree with, saying that, well, that person was a terrorist because the organization that was keeping these other people in prison or confined was a terrorist organization. Now, to my mind, that was very much duress. And so this person should have been granted an exception in my point of view. However, the court did not find that. I hope that it goes up to the Supreme Court again. Another interesting issue is there's a form of relief called administrative closure. And that means that when one is in immigration court, the immigration judge can put the case on hold and let it rest for a while. Because in many situations, the person may be able to get some relief, but it's going to take time. They may be on a quota system. They may be marrying a U.S. citizen. They may be waiting for their visa to become current. There are all kinds of permutations and variations on this theme. And so the judge may take note of that and grant what's called administrative closure, and then later on, when relief becomes available, the person can recalendar. Now, that was available for quite a long time until very recently, when the court decided, well, no, the judge does not have jurisdiction to grant administrative closure, to let these cases rest until there's a solution. But we're fighting against that as well. And in the Seventh Circuit, actually, Judge Barrett made a decision recently that the judge actually does have jurisdiction to grant administrative closure. So that's a good thing coming out of the recently appointed Supreme Court Justice Barrett. And I'm looking forward to that holding it being held also in the Ninth Circuit, where I mainly practice. So that means that it gives people time to work out their relief.
Absolutely, absolutely. What can, from your perspective, Attorney Wood, what can immigrants do to remain safe in the United States?
Well, there's something afoot which is quite frightening, and that is that the ICE, Immigration Control and Enforcement, can pick up an individual And if that individual is undocumented, they can enforce what's called expedited removal and not give the person a chance to litigate his or her case in immigration court. And that's extremely frightening. One can be picked up going to the laundromat, bringing your children to school, whatever. And ICE doesn't need to have a criminal conviction for authority to deport this person and detain them. And so one thing that I would advise a would-be immigrant is to apply for something, because that gives you some hope of being in court and not just being picked up off the street and deported in some sort of way where you don't even have a chance to tell your story. I would also say that it's extremely important to confer with an immigration lawyer who's aware of all the possible benefits that you might be eligible for, because many people have no idea even that they're eligible for DACA. One really wonderful thing that just happened is that DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is now available, and it's available to new applicants. So there's lots of forms of relief that might be available, and people don't know about it. So you need to confer with an attorney and find out what you might be eligible for. Because there's all kinds of relief through family, through work. Also, employment-based visas are current in most countries, meaning that there's a whole other side of immigration having not to do with human rights, but with jobs. Now, if your employer wants to petition for you, you may be eligible to get what's called a labor certification. And if that labor certification is approved by the Department of Labor, then your employer can file what's called an I-140, or a petition for a foreign worker. And once that's approved, you might be able to immigrate and bring your family with you. So these are all things that immigrants need to know.
What possible choices do you feel Congress has in, revising and implementing new immigration legislation at this point?
Well, once again, in the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, there was a special allocation of visas for people who had worked in the fields. It was for what's called seasonal agricultural workers. And now with the pandemic upon us and the food chain perhaps interrupted, we see how they were always important, but we see how essential farm workers are. And farm workers are the most disenfranchised, not just with the vote, but on all kinds of levels. And those most disenfranchised people, the poverty they suffer is appalling. They live in housing that is not really fit for human habitation. Their children are hungry. Most of their children work, even though they're underage. They work in the fields or work in factories. So many of these children go to school during the day and work at night. And they do it to help out the families. And the farm workers are essential. We don't have food. We don't have our food chain without the farm workers. So I think that we need to press on Congress to pass another form of amnesty, especially for the farm workers, because most of them live in abject poverty, and their children are forced to work.
Yeah. Right.
And yet, if we were to write some legislation and pass some legislation that gave legal status to these people, they would be better off, and the nation as a whole would be better off, rather than having people feeding us who are hiding in the dark and afraid.
Exactly right, and that's very important, because a lot, the information that you're sharing is extraordinarily important, because people don't necessarily realize that there is opportunity, there is help, and there is guidance. If people want to, I can't believe this half hour flew by as quickly as it has, but if people want to learn more and connect, what is the best way that they can do that, Attorney Wood?
The best thing is to contact either your local pro bono legal organization in the city where you live, or you can call me and I'll help you. And I can direct you to other organizations.
And the website is www.law Law Offices of Judith L. Wood. That's WOOD.com. Law Offices of Judith L. Wood.com. Attorney Wood, this was really eye-opening and riveting, and thanks for all the amazing work that you do on the behalf of those who are, seeking a life of peace and serenity. And again, I really appreciate all the time. I can't believe the half hour went by fast, but hopefully we can welcome you back at some point and maybe explore more and share more with our audience. I think it's relevant.
I really hope so.
And, it was really a pleasure. I know you're so extremely busy. So thanks for taking the time thus far out of your busy day to join me as my guest. Oh, you were a pleasure as well.
To speak to you.
You enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll chat again soon, I am sure. Thanks for joining us as my special guest on the show today.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care now. A very special guest, Attorney Judith L. Wood, based in Los Angeles, but works with clients literally all over. And again, I encourage you, if you'd like to learn more, have any questions, or would like to have a consultation, Law Offices of JudithLWood.com is a perfect place to begin. All the other information as far as contact are on her website as well. This is your host, Jim Masters, thanking you for your time this time. Till next time, stay tuned. We'll be back momentarily right here on Close Up Radio with another amazing guest we're celebrating here. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll be back in just a moment with more. Thanks for being with us in this episode of Close Up Radio. You take care. Be well. Bye for now.